Hi, Martha. How are you today?
Oh, I'm great. How are you doing today?
Delighted to be here, and I look forward to our conversation. And I'll start with a question to get us off the bat. You bill yourself as a shamanic medicine woman.
Mhm.
The woman part I get. You don't have to explain that.
Okay.
Okay, but let's start with the medicine part.
Sure.
Why the adjective of medicine?
Well, so actually, medicine and woman do really go together. So if we're looking at ancestral practices in many indigenous cultures, the medicine woman would have been the kind of generic title given to the herbalist, to the midwife, to the death doula, to the woman who helps with, illness, both mental and emotional, as well as physical. And so medicine woman is really speaking to the tradition that's handed down um, um, ancestrally. Sorry, the wrong word. I kept saying astrologically, and I'm like, that's not, I mean,
Well,
maybe
it
a
may
little
be
bit,
astrologically
but maybe
too.
also that, yeah, ancestrally throughout the female lineage, to teach the younger women into, coming into being of service of what are these plants? What do they do? How do they work in the body? What do you not mix together? But medicine woman has started to, as we are remembering in many very intense ways in this modern time, medicine woman has kind of opened up to be more than just an herbalist or a curandera in the kind of Latin speaking countries. Um, Medicine woman is really speaking to bringing a medicine to an individual and then helping steward or guide them, walking alongside them as they engage with that medicine and have it heal or transform or alchemize inside their body. So
Mhm.
you can see how that works with something like psilocybin or non psychedelic herbs and flower essences. But for me, the medicine that I bring that I've learned in that feminine ancestral practice is that of the keen. So keening is this ancient grief tending ritual that we see mostly recorded practice in Ireland and Scotland, though there's no doubt that there's practices and ancient practices of grief tending and keening around the world. We just are still quite new to reclaiming and recounting that historical information and getting it written in a new contextualizing format. But basically keening is this ancient grief tending ritual where we use breath, movement, and a little bit of sound if needed, and permission to get down into the parts within the body that hold tremendous grief, that hold resentment and rage, frustration, fear, shame, and we start to let it up and out. So it's no longer burdening our bodies in the ways that it has, keeping us in a way of living that has been limiting or preventative or disastrous. And so, real quick, the ancient tradition of keening was a formal practice, one that was about singing laments and mourning at wakes. But in our, and it was almost completely eradicated by the church and by colonizing practices from the UK, moving from Britain up into Scotland and Ireland. But we have found that just a handful of women resurged the tradition in the 20th century. And two women specifically, Mary McLaughlin in Ireland and Madge Bray in Scotland, who are both, I think, in their 70s or early 80s, are have written articles about it and are bringing back this tradition, teaching it. And it's been absolutely amazing to watch. And I'm kind of that second and tertiary generation
Mhm.
where I am learning it in a much more shamanic way. So it's really about a healing practice. It's that medicine work of bringing this thing that is inside all of us. We all have a connection to this grief tending experience and expression. So it is within all of us, and we are all capable of doing it. But just for so many generations, we've been told to shove the emotions in. And so the medicine work that I do is channeling this kind of energetic frequency from the keeners who come before me, from the goddess who helps support and is kind of the personification, the deification of this frequency, this experience. And so I channel that energy in and really with guiding the individual through breath and movement and sound, or even stillness. It's all about bringing that stuff up that is ready to be released. And that's my work as a medicine woman. It's very intuitive.
Okay. Tell me about the shamanic, more about the shamanic part.
Yeah, sure. So shamanism is going to be more, so if I think I look at shamanic and medicine woman as one title, bridging both feminine and masculine, or
Okay.
intuitive and structural. So intuitive being that medicine side, which is very much in the flow with the moment and the people, etc. Shamanic is more speaking to that tradition, the lineage, the ancestral and indigenous practice. For some, it may be Quechua, it may be Mayan, it may be Egyptian, it may be Bon, like Bon Buddhist. It could be, there's so many, even still living traditions around the world today. But for me, the shamanic route I took was more core shamanism. It started with Egyptian mysteries, moved into core shamanism, and then into Celtic spirituality. But what I'll just say, core shamanism is basically saying, across the world, across time, there are all these indigenous practices where people lived in communion and in reciprocity with nature, with the earth. And the shaman was one who, after years and years, in some cases decades, of studying from the human teachers, of going through rites of passage and death ceremonies and rebirths with spirit, with their spirit helpers and ancestral helpers, then finally come into being of service to the community. And that is when the community affirms, wow, you are the real deal. You are doing the work. You are shaman. That's when they call themselves shaman. And so these shamanic practitioners are the original lawyers. They're the original therapists. They're the original doctors, right? They are these medicine people, but are upholding the tradition of their culture. So they know the mythology. They know the cosmology. How did we get here? What are we doing here? They know and embody that bridge between ordinary human experience and non-ordinary spiritual realms. And so by being the bridge, they connect these two things that are seemingly disconnected or seemingly not cohesive. Because in many ways we are very tangible living in the 3D. And so they bridge these two realms to access the information that will help support the human community. And then also bringing the questions of, what do I need to heal this? How do I fix that? What can bring the rain back? And they go to spirit and they say, these are our questions. And so in modern time, shamanism has really moved more, especially as a shamanic healer. I see that shamanism is about ceremony. It's about ritual. It's about helping people remember that reciprocity with nature. But in our modern times, shamanism, especially in shamanic healing, has predominantly been about soul healing, soul retrieval work, helping people who've experienced trauma to bring that disassociated self from that's stuck in that original trauma, if we're speaking in terms of psychology, bringing it back into the present, helping it mature up and age up to become one with. And so it's a multifaceted, right? There's one part, it's like, hey, little version of you, you're not this age anymore. You're no longer stuck here. You're now this person with this wisdom, this experience, this safety, this protection, blah, blah, blah. It's time for you to come home if you're ready. So there's one part of aging up the inner child. There's also a part of reparenting that inner child from the current self, loving them, tending to them, helping them feel safe, so that the memory that informs our pattern of behavior and our cognitive thinking can start to be rewritten by the present. And so soul healing is incredibly important because it allows us to be present. And it allows us to make new choices from a present and embodied sense of self, not from the place of wounding of the past. So shamanism, in terms of shamanic or shaman in my title, is really speaking to me as bridge between worlds, me as healer, and also me as lineage keeper, right? So if speaking to the core of shamanism, there are these universalities, these general truths across all of those indigenous cultures across time and place that overlap. They may have different faces and names, but it's the same concept. So as teacher, as a mentor in shamanism, I'm upholding these core shamanic universalities and these wisdoms and sharing it with those who are ready to find a sense of flow and openness with themselves. So shamanism is tradition and kind of structure, and medicine woman is more flow and kind of alchemy, I guess.
Okay. Great explanation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have some biases of understanding on my part, and
Mhm.
let me throw out to you, and please correct them where they are in error.
Sure.
Um, the um, Historically, my understanding of the tribal shaman was essentially becoming what we would perceive to be interdimensional,
Mhm.
and their connection was certainly to provide the services that you're describing as shamanic, but the female role was segregated from that shamanic role, in that the female role was much more tied to um, uh, nature spirits, which I think is what you were referring to in your explanation.
Mhm.
But they were distinctly different roles, and because they were different roles because they reflected the different characterizations of male and female. In the nature of our experience and the range of consciousness that we experience, male and female is very distinctly segregated, not by gender, but by role.
Mm.
And the every interaction within creation is a subject-object interaction.
Mm.
The female is always the object, and the male is always the subject. And the simple uh, explanation of that, the female always perceives itself as the consciousness that it is, as being closer to the creator. The male perceives itself as being farther from the creator, only in
Mm.
perception, not
Mhm.
in actuality.
Mhm.
And the purpose of that role is the um, object is always the teacher, the
Mhm.
subject is always the student, even though in the course of an interaction, obviously we're male and female, and we're talking and we're exchanging, so we're flip flopping that role within the context of the object subject relationship. Um, the um, our non our metaphysical self is non-gendered,
Mhm.
and so this is a role that we're playing to fulfill our learning and teaching process within the incarnation. Um, we've lost that. You attributed it to a large degree to the church, but science has further exacerbated with the quote unquote Enlightenment period, and I think it's gone to extremes, and we're to the extreme now that we're kind of recognizing the value of what has been diminished by this hyper activity and intellectuality.
Mhm.
Um, your role in this position of shamanic medicine woman, um, how do you exert your efforts in um, bringing back the importance of that spirituality connection of either the shamanic male role or the traditional male role or the medicine woman role? How do you see yourself being an advocate for those?
So you brought up some really amazing conversation points. So
Okay, good.
yes.
That's why I'm here.
Yes. So like, in terms of kind of understanding the role, you're right. There was, in fact, when we're looking at rites of passage, ceremonies in indigenous traditions, typically male and female presenting people or identifying people would have been separated because there are different roles for each of these individuals in the community in the larger picture. So the rites of passage ceremonies would have been different for a young female versus a young male. And it totally varies, whether it was 1 day, 3 hours, 3 days, 1 year. Did we go somewhere? Were we buried alive? Like, it's just all of these different things. It was their
Hmm.
fasting. It really depends on the culture, the community, etc. But ultimately, what they are also learning in these rites of passages that, what I've read from in the books, and of course, Mircea Eliade, even though he was like a seminal writer, also missed a lot of things because he was writing from an early 20th century masculine Eurocentric perspective. And so he's like, the shaman is the man. And it's like, actually, there's a whole book by Barbara Tevlock, I think is her last name, called Women in the Shaman's Body. And it's actually articulating how there are so many petroglyphs and cave paintings where it's showing women actually as shamans too. Or as the shaman, I should say. And so it's the role itself. I think if we can start to see it from a 21st century perspective, it isn't really gendered. I mean, some scholars would probably argue with me. It's like, but let's just for this conversation, not try to think about it as a this or a that, right? Because as I embody it, and to your point, when you asked me, like, how am I articulating and advocating for this kind of union of the two within me? That's the title, right? Is I already bring it in shamanic medicine woman. However, let's go deeper. So the feminine or the yin energy, that moon energy, is very much receptive. It is perceptive. It is wisdom. It is intuition. The masculine, the yang, the sun is expressive. It's active. It's protective. It's the container that holds so that the flow of energy can come in and be given structure. We need structure. Otherwise, it's just glitter in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
But if we have a bowl for the glitter, then we have somewhere for this wisdom to be held and seen and nourished and respected and listened to, that then can inform the action. So, we see it in Hinduism and in Buddhism, it's spoken as wise action. And that's the unification of the blending of the two as one, because ultimately living in today, or living anytime, but living as a human is about bridging these two. We see it with the Shiva and Shakti kind of position. We see it in esoteric Buddhism, like Chakra Samvara and Vajra Yogini, these examples of these masculine and feminine deities or teachers that are in sexual union. It wasn't about having great, awesome sex, although that's not always a bad thing per many Celtic gods.
Right.
But it's about blending the two as one. And so how are we using our intuition to then guide us to be wise in our action and integral in our action, so that way when we are acting, what happens from our action, the outcome, and then the reception and the reaction from that, then teaches us more, that we bring in as information that then teaches us about our next action. And so it's all a cycle, and the two are intertwined as one. But when in our modern world, we're constantly acting, doing, hyper-productive, hyper-reactive. And we're not always intuitive. We're not always slowing down. We're not always resting to listen. What is coming up from here? What is coming up from the intuition? We're always in our brain, but not in our intuition. And so making space to slow down our action is one of the hardest things to do as a modern, especially Western world, human or American culture. So for me, one of the main things I do is I speak about intuition and action as bedfellows, as relying on each other so we can be in the best version of ourselves, not as a value judgment against who we've been, but as if to say, like, I want to end my day feeling like I was my best self. Like, I didn't act like a little child. I didn't get frustrated and throw a tantrum. I'm human. It does happen. I know. But like, I want to end my day feeling like I was my best self. Well, okay, that begins with the first breath you take in the morning. Are you allowing that breath to come in and wake you up and say, I'm here, I'm in my body? What intuition, what intuitive nudge is pushing me forward? What do I want to start my day with? Stretching? Do I want to start it with a coffee? It's that simple. Like, how do we want to start the day? Does our body and our intuition want us to start the day? And then we do that thing. And then as we're doing that, our intuition's like, hey, that was cool. Let's do this next. Okay, let's do that. And we start to list, and of course we have bills to pay and jobs to go to. So, we have to fit these things in. But that's largely kind of how I'm speaking to it when I'm talking to people, is first come back to the breath. And then what is your body asking for? Because a lot of times, especially in these worlds, it's rest, it's compassion for self, and it's slowing down. And I think that as as it comes back to thinking of the body as its own ecosystem, So it's going back to the point about nature, going back to the point about being separate from nature. I think we have this history that comes from, you mentioned the Enlightenment period. Let's explore the world. Let's give everything a classification, draw a picture of it, and then we know what it is. We have defined it. We have a name for it. We have a box that it fits in, and we are now kind of in charge of it.
Compartmentalized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in that, subversively in that is a sense of dominion. There's a sense of like, well, I understand how electricity works now, so it's no longer mystical or magical. I understand that this plant does blah, blah, blah. And so therefore, to me, it's just a plant. Or I learned about this plant. So kava, for instance, kava is the predecessor for Xanax, the plant predecessor. Mm-hmm. So like, well, now we have Xanax that we can make in a factory. So why do we even eat the kava root? Meh. You know? And so there's this, whether people agree with me or not, whatever, it's fine. But I feel like there comes with classifying scientifically, discovering, but naming everything. There's a sense of dominion over. And I think that also feeds into how we handle our own body. Mind over matter, right, Dean? I'm sorry you had a rough morning. Get to your bootstraps, get to work, go do it. Do the thing, be productive, be useful. And like, what if we didn't do that? What if we allowed the magic of nature to the way the river flows through the pebbles or over the rocks, rather, the way the clouds form animals in our imagination and then disperse into something else? Can't there still also be magic and mystery and beauty in that too? And if we see that out there, can't we then do that with our own body? Can we not love our own body even as it gets in pain or is emotionally burdened and we haven't dealt with our stuff, and that's fair? Like, you know, we can still love our body. And as we love our body, as we take time and be present with the magic and the mystery, we start to open up more to that intuition, which then guides us back into that wise action. So I realize I think I slightly answered your question, and I kind of went on a total train ride south.
Great. No, it's fine. Yeah.
But that's kind of how I own it.
Well, we all consciousness learns by the analogy process, by comparison and contrast. Mm-hmm. And we that share this range of consciousness have a specific design of how we process thought, and that design, that blueprint, requires that with each incarnation we create a hierophant, a false perception of self. That identity, you can call it an ego, it's all the same thing. And part of that design is we begin in a condition of unconsciousness, which is in and of itself an often misunderstood concept. But awareness is the inherent characteristic of the creator that we are tasked with becoming at this range of consciousness. And we begin with awareness, but the awareness is directionally pointed outside of us. In order to, we create this hierophant, this identity, for the sole purpose of tricking the world to giving us more what we like. And we do that until we have an awakening. And awakening is nothing more than that first time in your life when you realize that all the stuff you've been doing may be making you conventionally successful, but you're not happy. And in order to realize you're not happy, you have to invert that awareness for the first time. And once you do that, I think everything that you're describing that we have abandoned in our history is that awareness of awareness, and learning to use the tool of awareness and achieving the guidance which the shamanic traditions and the medicine woman traditions, from your description, that's exactly what they're doing. Is they're teaching the tribe to learn the tool of awareness and invert that awareness and guide their healing not by performing healing, but by guiding the individual to recognize their healing powers within themselves. Is that an accurate reflection and summation?
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it for sure. And I think it's, not to make it sound like it's all individualistic. I think it's about coming inward to learn about the self while, and while also seeing the self as a part of the whole. That the self exists because of the whole, and the whole exists because of the self. And so I think, especially in the rites of passages that we read about, and in that some individuals are still lucky to go through naturally, it really is about remembering that yes, you are important, and yes, you need to tend to the self, but also we do it so that way we can be our best, strongest, aligned self for the collective.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm in my purpose, I will best serve the collective. And yeah, I think, and I'm kind of just curious, just to volley back a little bit about the first 7 years of our lives, as like that's really when we get an idea of what is the world about per um our senses. And I find that so many people that I work with and I do sessions with, a lot of most often sessions are going back to that inner child, somewhere between 2 to 4 up until 16. Now, of course, the 16, that's another 7-year cycle, but that those first 8 to 9 years are really important. And those are the years that we biologically have to be selfish, right? Feed me so I survive. Clean me so I don't get sick, right? So babies cry because they have to. They selfishly can't take care of themselves. And so they evolutionarily, we are selfish. But that's also coming into the years where then we are taught to not be selfish. Stop doing this. Listen to me. Follow the rules. Be quiet. Respect this. Or if you do this, you'll get ignored. If you do this, you will get yelled at. If you do this, whatever. And so this is when we start to have our behavior conditioned. And so I find it fascinating that, a lot of times when we have people going through awakenings, the ego tends to go in two different, not always two, but there's two major directions. There's one where it's like, oh shit, this ego thing is something that could make me really have a difficult time. So let me work on detaching. Let me work on seeing it, but not attaching to it, and be selfless as best as possible. And then there's this other part where it's like, oh, this feels good. And I've never had this kind of attention, and it makes me feel useful, and it makes me feel necessary. And so I'm going to feed into this. And that's where you start to see those well-intentioned, maybe, but not the most ethically responsible practitioners and teachers. And I just find it so fascinating if we zoom out and we look at these situations and think about, or ask the question, like, what did their first 9 to 10 years look like? What were they taught about the world and how they're allowed to be or not allowed to be? Because I would just be so curious. I don't have an answer, but I'm just kind of throwing it out there, like, ego isn't always awful as long as we are owning it and we understand the why as much as we can. But owning it and being responsible and ethical with it is the most, I think, the most important thing. But I think it's a tricky little minefield, like in a world where we see celebrity culture, and
Yeah, but
influencer
that's
culture.
the nature of the design, though, and
Yeah.
and one of the strategic things that is within the most definitively within the curriculum of our learning in this range of consciousness is to get to the point where we make the choice, and it literally is called the choice.
Yeah.
And the choice, and understand that this identity that we create is our perception of self. It's who we
Mhm.
think we are. And the reason that it's so difficult to go through the process of letting go of those beliefs that we've incorporated into this identity is if we're not who we think we are,
Yeah.
then who are we? Which fear? That's, the fear that
Mhm.
keeps us as we are. But we are obligated to, and this occurs over multiple lifetimes. It's not a one lifetime
Mm.
decision, but we begin to what is called polarize either service to self or service to others. And so if you are choosing to enhance that identity, then you're choosing service to self because essentially you fear letting go of that identity that is perpetuated from lifetime to lifetime. If you are choosing service to others, then you are choosing to align with the Creator, and you begin to develop that consideration for others at an early age. And regardless of the experiences, and an awful lot of higher consciousness souls will choose an incarnation where in those early years they will experience significant reinforcement for that service to self ideology from parents and immediate family and so forth, because they become the teacher. The student becomes the child becomes the teacher for them because of their orientation towards the service to others. But that choosing service to self is what is the foundation for most of the aberrant psychological diagnoses that we have, as well as the difficulties that we have within culture. And you were alluding to American and Western culture that essentially diminishes the value of tribal behavior and tribal customs, and the development of intensification of science and so forth did so because it provided those oriented towards service to self with the tools that they needed to dominate and subjugate the balance of the population. And so, and this is something that you will perpetuate if you choose that path. You will perpetuate potentially billions of years in higher consciousness, because you will continue that out of that same fear and requiring domination and subjugation in order to sustain yourself, and until you reach a brick wall. And the brick wall that you ultimately hit is you can't be in unity with the Creator and separate at the same time.
Right.
So you got to go back and start all over at square one and go through the whole process again down the other path. But that essentially is what perplexes our society. And your reference to the transformation that the population has not really experienced within the earthly experience. It precedes that with the same souls through 4 other planets that we were not kind to. So that is really what we're seeing now, what we're experiencing now. And I think that is part of why the rejuvenation of the interest in what you do within subcultures, if not in the mainstream, because it is a very viable mechanism for people to become more self-aware.
Absolutely.
And to assume the responsibility for their own healing. So from that standpoint, I'm grateful for the work that you have studied and learned to do, and the service that you're offering to folks, because the process is the same for everybody. There's nobody that has a separate process.
Right.
And, their willingness to undertake the process requires people like you that can guide them in their processes. And when you do you're the intuitive nature of your work. You work with openly with your guides and so forth.
Yeah. So the sessions I do, so I do individual sessions, both in person and virtually, because as you know, and your listeners probably also know, energy is everywhere all the time. We're the only ones that are believe in the limitations of time and space, and also our physical bodies can't physically move across. Whatever, it's fine.
Right.
But yes, but energy works everywhere all the time. So in person or virtually, individuals as well as couples or cohorts, like small practices, groups that work together. Think about like a small business, and as well as larger groups, also in person and virtually. And I do retreats. And so anyway, with all of these things, whether it's, and I also teach, gosh, I forgot about that. I also teach healing and a shamanic healing class and Celtic spirituality class and breathwork classes. And so with all of these things, I'm very open about first, who am I, right? How did I get here? What am I doing? But then also, what do I do? What is it that I'm doing? How does this work? And so basically I am here, I'm present with the individual. And at the same time, I have, set space, as we say, we set sacred space, but sacred space is everywhere. We just have to tap into it. So essentially I set or tap into sacred space, which means connecting to the earth, connecting to my highest self or to great spirit, and connecting to the allies, the medicines, the elements of the center in the heart. And as I feel that kind of connect, I say a little prayer that I riffed off of Christina Pratt's podcast from Why Shamanism Now, where she says, may what needs to be said, may what needs to be heard, be heard. And then I add, may what needs to be healed, be healed. May I do my work ethically with integrity to the greatest of my potential in the co-creative divine flow for the highest good, and may I release attachment to the outcome. And that, for me, more than anything, is just reminding me, what is my role here? This isn't about me. So just put your ego aside and be of service.
Mm-hmm.
And that allows my guides to come forward. And so as I kind of let people know, like, I'm, this bridge between these two realms. My
That's your vibrational tuning.
Right. And I say the spirit guides who I work with, or, you may know them by different names, but the masculine expression is going to be Metatron and Christ consciousness, or Jesus Christ. Also, Krishna comes in. I don't always tell everyone all these things, but sharing with you all. And then with the feminine, it depends on who I'm working with, who comes forth, but Kuan Yin from the Buddhist lineage. I see Isis from the Egyptian. And more often than not, it's the Marigan and her sister, the triple goddess, which is the Marigan, Bive, and Maka from the Celtic pantheon, as well as Brigid and many times the Kayak, she's the older hag of winter, or elder crone goddess. And so these just kind of float around. And then, of course, whoever I'm working with, there might be someone else that comes in, but I always triple check my sources, and I always triple check the guides who come through the door to make sure we're all in alignment and we're all here for the same purpose. And so because of that, so as I set space and I let people know, like, okay, you might hear me talk to myself, just trust that I'm getting information and then I just share it with you all. So bear with me. And usually people find it very entertaining because it's kind of goofy looking. But, so it's like I'm talking and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a good point. Or then I'll say, oh, I forgot. That is right. Okay. And then I come back to the group and then, but yeah, it's an absolute co-creative experience where I am here because the audience or the individual is asking for something energetically. And I happen to have access to the frequency of the thing they are speaking to. Not access as in I'm a gatekeeper, but just I have been in that frequency myself already. So it is a familiar frequency. And so then I connect with the deities or the aspects of spirit that are that frequency or of that, or are of that frequency, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
And then they channel that through me, and then they say, like, okay, now do this. And then I say, okay. And then for my human brain, I might also be sharing information because, we need our human teachers to make sense of what the heck is going on and why and how and what is it doing. But then, of course, we have spirit coming in as the medicine itself. So they are that frequency. I'm not giving the healing. I am not the healer. I am healing.
You're the instrument.
Exactly. I'm the conduit. I just happen to be the electrical spark that brings the very thing that these people have been praying for, and the very aspect of Great Spirit or God who has that answer. I just happen to help connect them. That's my role. And that's why I always remind myself that I will gladly take thank yous and praise, not too much praise. It makes me uncomfortable, but within reason. I will take it because I have done work and I've worked hard to be at this point in my practice. But ultimately, I always reflect back to the individuals. You are who called me here. You are the one who were ready. and you are the one who received the energy as it came through. So you must
They're
also
the ones that issued the calling.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it is a total co-creative. It's me in spirit. It's me in the audience. It's spirit in the audience. It's sacred Trinity.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yes.
Do you have any words of wisdom that you would like to share with our listeners before we
I am
depart?
the biggest fan
Put you
of
on the spot. Come up with some wisdom.
no. I am the biggest fan of having a strong foundation. I have a class called Check Yourself. It's self-paced, it's online, but I always check in with my people as they're taking it and do some email exchange. How's it going? What's your feedback? Or what's challenging you? How can I support you? And so even though it's self-paced and online, you're not without my support. But it's called Check Yourself because I'm all about a strong foundation. We are in quite the Wild West explosion of pop culture spirituality right now. And I am a firm believer of your intuition will not guide you in the wrong direction. However, it is great to have strong discernment. So that way, if you are going to a pop culture guru who's kind of half baked, then your discernment will call you out, hopefully, before you get too invested financially or otherwise. And then you can ask the question, what is it about this individual that I'm attracting? Or what is it about them that's attracting me? And how can I work with that? So what I'm saying is the Check Yourself class is broken up into 4 parts. It's about understanding how energy works. It's about how understanding your triggers. It's about understanding healthy energetic boundaries. And it's also understanding your intuitive gifts. And so whether you take this class or not, I totally respect whatever is best for you. But intuition will always guide you. Discernment is key, especially in this world, because there's a lot of charlatan action happening. And ultimately, if anyone ever tells you that they are the way to the salvation, they are the one with the answers, they are the one with the cure, they know more than everyone else because they studied X, Y, and Z, turn and walk away.
No,
because
run away.
that all is ego, right? Like
Yeah.
the truth is, God's wisdom is in the trees. It's in the water. It's in the air we breathe. Your
it's free.
agency, yes, it is in your
Yeah.
body. You have your power. We are honored if you select us to help walk alongside you in your healing path. We're not the ones walking for you. So anytime someone tells you or sells you that bag of goods, I would recommend you walk elsewhere. So that's my bit of wisdom.
Yeah. Good wisdom. Good wisdom. Yeah.
Thank you.
Wish you could bottle that and put it on a shelf so everybody could access it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a major problem. I had a guy, it's been several years ago, but, and I don't know how he got my, the number, but he contacted me and he was, scouting, um, for, um, second opinions on somebody that could, balance his chakras for him. And I told him, "I can't do that. You gotta do that." He said,
Mm.
"Well, my guide wants to charge me $7,000 to balance my chakras." I said, "Well, you need to find another another guy."
Okay, I thought you were saying like 70. I was like, well, that's about normal for like a healing session or whatever. But 7,000, you're joking.
Yeah, no, and I told him, "I can't do it. I wouldn't charge you anything for it. You gotta do that." And so he was and I don't know whatever happened to him. I mean, he hung up afterwards, but I tried to discourage that,
Mm.
activity. I mean,
Yeah,
but
I mean, yeah, like,
there are lots of charlatans out there.
whew, my goodness.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like an energy healing session absolutely will balance your chakras. It will also move some other things. It'll also bring this stuff up. It'll help you process this thing. I mean, healing sessions are incredibly amazing. They're alchemizing. They're transformative. They're affirming.
Yeah, but you're
But
doing the work. You're
but
doing
you
it
have to
yourself.
be open, right?
Yeah.
And also, you could not pay anything and you could go outside and you could just breathe with nature and be in one with the mountain
Take
and you
take a
can
walk
have,
in the woods.
right? So
Yeah.
like we're here to fast track some stuff for each other when desired or needed, but ultimately you don't need us if you're willing to listen to your intuition and do the hard work on your own with spirit.
It's on and I'll point out, you say a hard work, and it is hard work. It's the most difficult thing that you will ever do, but it's the most worthwhile thing. But
Yes.
the only thing that makes it different is you are challenging the authenticity of the beliefs that you've included into this ego.
It's simple. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's not difficult to understand. The material is easy to understand as long as you get those beliefs out of the way that are the hindrance to your accepting them.
Yeah, exactly right. Our limiting beliefs. It's amazing what they can do and do to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Perpetuate our stress and suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah. Martha, this has been great. I thank you very much for this. I hope it's been a fun visit for you too.
Oh, I've had a blast. I love nerding out and talking about the academic
Well, we
research.
did that for sure.
I'm all about it. And, and I'm so like, what you see is what you get. So if anyone ever is like, hey, I want to learn more about this, or I want to ask more nuanced understanding of like, what does it mean to be a healer? And yet I'm doing the work. I'm happy to talk more about that. So just reach out to me on my website. My website is marthamw.com, as in marthamedicinewoman.com, but marthamw.com. And my Instagram is Martha Medicine Woman spelled out. And just reach out to me and we can have a chit chat. It's all good. It's what I do.
Sounds great. And for the listeners that didn't jot that down, I'm going to put it in the show notes so you don't have to listen to the whole episode again. You can just go to the show notes and contact Martha directly.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for having me, Dean, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, folks. Go to the show notes and get Martha's information and contact her. And we're going to say goodbye for now.